You sleep in the chamber that night. Not because you have to, but because the bakery doesn't feel untouched anymore. Something about the message on the wall, the soot still damp, the handwriting not your own, it changes the room upstairs. Makes it feel like someone's been standing in your oven's shadow, watching. Down here, surrounded by names carved in soot and stone, you feel less exposed. You wake to the soft drip of condensation. The lamp has burned low, its last flame curled against the glass. Michael's curled up nearby, snoring lightly, one hand still clutching a half-eaten raisin loaf. Above you, muffled sounds filter through. Wheels on stone, distant morning bells, a cart tipping over. Nothing on fire yet. You climb the stairs and ease open the hidden panel, blinking at the sudden light. The bakery looks normal. Smells like it always does in the early hours, like proofing dough, warm ashes, and faintly burnt honey. The silence is comforting. You go to the oven, touch the stone. Still warm. You roll up your sleeves and get to work. The day unfolds slowly. No smoke, no alarms. But the tension remains. Customers arrive, but fewer. Conversations are shorter. Some look over their shoulders before stepping inside. The fire council doesn't return. Neither does the courier. But just before noon, a child slips through the door with a folded piece of cloth. Not paper, linen. You unfold it and find 3 tiny shapes painted with egg yolk. A loaf, a crescent moon, and a door. No message, no signature. You turn it over. Nothing. It's a marker, not a letter. A call sign, passed hand to hand, down alleyways and through layers of rumor and soot. You don't show Michael this one, not yet. Instead, you tuck it beneath the salt jar. At dusk, you descend to the chamber again. It's cooler tonight. The air smells like stone and something sweet. Maybe the herbs the old woman gave you. The mark from yesterday is faded, the soot drying, but the symbol is still clear. You add a new one beside it. A loaf, uncracked. A circle, closed this time. A single line, curved like steam. A message, we endured. Because you did. Whatever yesterday was, a warning, a trial, a rehearsal for something worse, it's past. You held your ground. The shop stands. The fire remains yours. Above you, Michael shouts that the raisin rolls are burning. You don't panic. Just smile. You move through the bakery that evening like someone who knows what they're doing, and more importantly, why. The routine is sharper now. The tools are cleaner. The oven gets a whispered thanks. Even Eustratius notices. "You're humming," he says, eyeing you suspiciously. "No one hums after fighting 5 fires in a week." "I didn't fight 5, you reply, "just 3 and a goat." He snorts, but doesn't press. That night, as the last embers fade and the shutters are closed, you sit with Michael and split a crusty heel of barley bread. No jam, just bread. Still warm. "I think it's over," he says, quietly. "No," you reply, "just paused." He nods slowly, chewing. You both look toward the oven. Its stones glow faintly, like a nightlight for an anxious empire. Constantinople won't stop burning, not for long. It never has. But now you know you're part of something bigger than bread. You're part of the net, the line, the memory. And as long as the chamber remains, as long as the names are read and the loaves keep rising, someone will always be watching the flames. You barely sleep that night. Not from fear exactly, but from anticipation. The kind that coils in your chest and flicks your ribs every time the wind knocks something over. You lie awake listening to the creaks of the bakery walls, the gentle exhale of the cooling oven, and somewhere outside, the thin yowl of a cat that sounds suspiciously like a child asking for soup. When dawn comes, it's pale and hazy, gray light filtered through a sky that hasn't made up its mind. You rise, dress without thought, and begin the morning tasks. The dough waits patiently. The oven, rebuilt and soot-streaked, hums like a creature with secrets. Mikhail stumbles down the stairs, half awake and half covered in flour, before even touching the sack. "You're up, really? I never slept." He raises an eyebrow. "Please tell me it wasn't the raisin regulation keeping you up?" You offer a ghost of a smile. "Something's going to happen," you say, "soon." And then, right on cue, the messenger returns. Not the fancy robe kind this time. This one's young, lean, a little too clean for a courier. He passes you a small scrap of parchment. No seal, just a phrase. "North wall, second hour, watch." You fold the paper, slide it into the fire without reading it twice. That's the thing about these messages now. They don't come with context. They come with quiet expectation. You're part of something, whether you agreed to it or not. Second hour. You pretend your errands take you that way, past the forum, down the long wall where the stones run straight and high and grim. It's a part of the city that smells like moss and secrets. You stand beside an old fig tree and wait. At first, nothing. Then a man steps from a shadowed doorway. Robes gray, beard dyed black, sandals too new to trust. He doesn't speak, just nods toward the wall. You follow. There, pressed into the mortar between two stones, is a symbol. A flame, 3 marks beneath it, and a word. Gathering. You don't ask where, you don't ask when. You simply memorize it. Burn it into your thoughts the way heat marks bread crust. Later in the bakery, you feel it again. That strange stillness, like the city has taken a deep breath and is waiting to see if it burns. You check everything, twice. The oven, the flue, the cracks, the fire pole. You refill the buckets, tie new cloths, reroute the kindling. You even move the olive oil, which has not misbehaved once in 5 years, but which now feels dangerously smug. The customers come and go. Some ask about new loaves. Some don't even buy, just pass by with a nod. You recognize 2 of them from the chamber wall. Names you saw scratched into the plaster. Names of fire runners. One of them, an older woman with scarred hands, slips you a pouch of dry herbs and says, "For the smoke." You nod, not entirely sure what that means, but tuck it away. At midday, the bells ring. Not the fire bell, not the hour bell. A new one, deep, metallic. One you've never heard before. The bakery falls silent. Mikhail looks up from shaping a fig loaf. That's not good, is it? No, it's not. You step outside. Smoke. Not thick, not roaring, but strategic, controlled. A trail of it rising from 3 points across the city. Not accidents, not coincidence. You've seen random fires. They don't look like this. Then, from the east, a figure runs, cloaked, out of breath. They don't stop, just shout one word as they pass. Diversion. You don't wait. You bolt the door, lock the oven, toss a cloth over the bread bench. Mikhail already has the fire hook in one hand, a water skin in the other. Outside, the city is shifting. You can feel it like a tremor in your ribs. Crowds forming, whispers rippling. And then, a scream. But not one of panic, one of rage. You grab the hidden door handle beneath the flour sacks. The passage to the chamber yawns open, cool and silent. You lead Mikhail down, sealing it behind you. The chamber glows with soft lamplight. You reach the wall, not your usual one, but the far end, where the oldest symbols live. You clear a patch of dust and draw. A single loaf, cracked. 3 flames rising beside it. A circle, open. Mikhail watches, eyes wide. What are we doing? Marking that we're still here, you say, and that we know. A second later, another mark appears. Not drawn by you. On the opposite side, still wet. Someone else is in the tunnels, or has been. You and Mikhail sit with backs to the wall. The bakery above your heads, the city burning. Or at least pretending to. You listen. To the footsteps above. To the voices outside. To the quiet crackle of a fire not quite begun. Are we part of something now? Mikhail asks. The next few days unfold in that weird, slow way that only Constantinople can manage. Half tranquility, half tension, like the whole city's waiting for a punchline. The Fire Council doesn't follow up. No more scrolls, no more summons. But that doesn't bring relief. It just deepens the mystery. You and Mikael bake like you've always done. Early mornings, midday deliveries, long evenings of heat and ash, but the air around you is different now. Thicker, intentional. You're not paranoid, you're attentive. The customers seem more curious nightly too, not just about bread texture or sesame coverage, but about you. They ask little questions in innocent voices. Did you see that smoke near the cisterns the other day? Ever thought about opening a second oven? You have such a good view of the rooftops, don't you? You smile, nod, say as little as possible. One woman asks if she can buy day-old bread to feed the imperial pigeons. Mikael whispers, "That's not a real thing, is it?" You just shrug and hand her the loaf. Then, one evening, a new visitor arrives. He's tall, hooded, smells faintly of parchment and iron. Says he's from the Department of Grain Provisions, but his boots are too clean for someone who handles wheat. "Mind if I inspect the oven?" he asks politely, already moving toward it. Eustratius just waves a flowery hand. Let him. If he finds a secret dragon under there, maybe we can start charging extra. The man doesn't laugh. He kneels beside the oven, tapping the bricks, not the cracked ones near the back, but the sealed ones, the ones near the hidden chamber door. You hold your breath. But he doesn't pry further, just stands, dusts his knees, and nods. "Well constructed," he says. "Not every baker takes such care." You watch him leave. Mikael turns to you, pale. Was that a threat or a compliment? "Both," you mutter. The next day, you visit the chamber beneath the bakery again, but this time something's changed. There's a new mark on the wall. You didn't put it there. Mikael didn't either. A single line drawn in fresh soot, a flame, upright and simple. Beneath it, a circle. You stare. It's not a threat, it's a sign. Someone's been down here. Someone who knows. You pace the room, checking for other changes. Nothing stolen, nothing moved, nothing obvious. But the message is clear. You're not alone. Not anymore. You and Mikael debate whether to seal the entrance. He wants to build a fake wine rack over it. You suggest a pile of accidentally fallen bricks. In the end, you do neither. Because if someone wants to find this room, they already have. Instead, you leave a reply. A flame of your own, drawn beside the first. No circle, just a line. Simple, present, watching. Days pass. Then comes the rumor. Not a fire this time, a theft. A small fire station, such as it is, was broken into. Not ransacked, just accessed. Quietly. Someone took records, charcoal drawings, a few names. You hear it from the spice merchant, who heard it from her cousin who delivers ink to the prefect's office. They say someone's gathering lists, she whispers, eyes darting. Lists of who helped, not who failed, who fought the flames. That chills you more than the fires ever did, because you remember those names on the chamber wall. Names of people who pulled children from rooftops, who threw water with blistered hands, who stood between flames and strangers. Why would someone want those names? You don't say anything, just pass her the cinnamon roll and nod. That night, you check the chamber again. Still quiet, still dusty, but you feel something in the air now, like someone's just left, like heat from a hand still lingers on the stone. You leave no mark this time. Some things don't need a reply. Back upstairs, the oven crackles softly. The dough rises. And yet, the city feels like it's leaning in, listening. Then, 2 days later, a scroll arrives. Not from the guild, not from the council, from someone older. The seal isn't wax, but pressed clay, etched with 3 overlapping flames. You crack it open. It reads, "We remember the ones who stood. We watch those who kneel. Prepare the bakery. That's it. You show it to no one. You burn it in the oven. Mikhail asks what it said. You lie. Just a new bread regulation, you say. He groans. Please tell. The chamber changes you. Not in some grand, poetic way. No glowing epiphanies or mystical revelations, but in quiet, practical ones. You start noticing more, listening harder. You pay closer attention to how the wind shifts in the alley, how the oven breathes during rain, how the pigeons on the roof take flight 5 seconds before a fire bell rings. You don't say anything to Mikhail, but he notices too. You're quieter, he says one morning, watching you arrange loaves with almost surgical precision. Less flour in my ears, you reply. But that's not it. You're listening to the city now, like it's a dough that speaks if you knead it just right. The bakery becomes more than a workplace. It becomes a node in a network of tension, a place where people stop not just for bread, but for news, suspicion, hope, and theories. The old man who sells candles stops by with wax-streaked fingers and a warning. Watch your roof tiles. Last night's wind was unnatural. The girl who brings flowers in exchange for sesame rolls says her cousin smelled smoke near the western cistern. Even the grumpy fishmonger mutters, "Something's coming," as he hands you an eel that looks mildly cursed. And they're right. You can feel it too. Not heat exactly, but pressure. Like the city is exhaling slowly, and something smoldering hides in its breath. Then, late one afternoon, the messenger arrives. He wears a dark blue sash and carries a scroll sealed in red wax. Not the city's standard seal. This one bears the twin torches of the Sebastokrator, a high imperial office rarely interested in small fires or small bakers. You open it with flour-dusted fingers. By imperial order, you are requested to supply 12 loaves for the Great Fire Council convening tomorrow at the monastery of St. Mamas. Attendance mandatory. Non-compliance punishable by fine, revocation of license, or permanent removal from guild register. You blink. There is so much to unpack. Mikhail reads it over your shoulder. We're going to the Fire Council? I guess so. What is the Fire Council? You stare at the parchment. I have absolutely no idea. That night, you visit the chamber again. You light a lamp and sit beneath the domed ceiling, tracing your fingers over the older names. You wonder how many of them were summoned. How many walked into a council meeting thinking it was about bread, only to leave with something heavier than loaves. You leave a mark on the wall. Just a small fire symbol with a question mark beside it. Mikhail adds a goat. The next morning, you dress in your cleanest tunic, the one without the olive oil stain shaped like Emperor Heraclius, and carry a basket of your best loaves. Crusty, firm, still steaming. You and Mikhail take the long route, past shuttered shops and open drains, and a man trying to sell hot wine from a cup he clearly found in the gutter. The monastery of St. Mamas is quiet. Too quiet. You're greeted by a monk who leads you through a side gate into a stone hall that smells like old leather, dust, and pine resin. At the far end, a long table, lined with men and women in city robes, guild cloaks, and one particularly fancy hat you assume belongs to someone with too much time and too little bakery experience. They motion for you to place your bread at the center of the table. You do. Mikhail places his next to yours, carefully arranging them so the raisins don't look like eyes. Then the questioning begins. First, it's about your oven. Dimensions, fuel type, chimney design. Then about your fire response, bucket number, training, readiness. Then, oddly, about your knowledge of old tunnels. You lie, a little. You say your oven is perfectly sealed, which is almost true. Your buckets are always full. They're not always full, per se, and you've never once seen a tunnel in your life. You have, in fact, seen one yesterday. Historians still argue whether these fire councils were official safety reviews or subtle tests of loyalty. The records are sparse. Some say they were a way to select candidates for city positions. Others insist they were used to monitor rumors and root out unrest disguised as negligence. All you know is they write down everything. You're finally dismissed just as your back starts to protest the cold stone bench. One of the officials, an older woman with no visible eyebrows, leans forward and says, "We're watching your quarter. Be vigilant." You nod. Vigilant is now your full-time hobby. 3 mornings later, you find it. Hidden in the soot, behind the stacked kindling and the extra stone tiles, tucked neatly against the bakery's rear wall. A door. Not a proper one, no hinges, no knob, just a narrow panel in the masonry that's been sealed with plaster and half a century's worth of dust. The outline is barely visible. You only notice it because the soot doesn't stick to one edge, as if the stone behind it breathes just a little differently. You call Mikhail over. "Is that?" he whispers. "Don't know," you say, "but we're about to find out." You pry it open using the fire hook and an old pastry knife. The plaster gives with a sigh, the panel creaks, and a cloud of air escapes. Musty, ancient, not entirely unpleasant. It smells like old parchment and wet limestone. Behind the panel, stairs. Stone ones, steep and narrow, winding down into the earth. You glance at Mikhail. He's already lit a stub of candle and is grinning like a boy about to steal jam. "We're doing this, right?" "Of course you are. Because this city hides more beneath its stones than it ever shows above. And sometimes what's hidden is more important than what's on the surface." You descend slowly. The stairs are slick with centuries. The walls are marked with symbols you don't recognize. Faded, scratched, layered like overlapping graffiti from generations of people who had no intention of being remembered. At the bottom, a corridor. Arched, barely wide enough for 2 people. The air is cooler here, dense with secrets. You hear dripping somewhere, and your own footsteps echo back like ghosts with opinions. Then, another door. This one wooden, ancient, scorched at the edges. You hesitate. Mikhail nudges it open. Inside is a small chamber, round, with a domed ceiling and a floor made of old mosaic tiles. The pattern is hard to see through the grime, but it looks like a wheat sheaf, stylized, golden, surrounded by flames. You both step in. At the center is a stone slab, waist-high, like an altar or a table. On top of it, blackened iron tools. Tongs, a small paddle, a cracked baking stone, and a bowl filled with charcoal so old it's nearly turned to dust. But it's what's on the walls that stops your breath. Drawings. Hundreds of them, maybe more. Scratched into the plaster, layered in soot and charcoal, drawn in ink, and even carved. Loaves of bread, flames, buckets, ovens, goats. Names. Some you recognize from old guild records, some you don't. At the center of the dome, someone has painted a massive eye, wide and unblinking, looking down at the chamber like a god with flour on its robe. You don't speak for a long time. Mikhail finally whispers, "What is this place?" You run a hand along one of the carved names. "I think it's a firehouse," you say. "A baker's firehouse." Not a place to live, a place to remember, to record, maybe even to plan. A secret room hidden beneath the city where bakers gathered, not just to share techniques or dough secrets, but to protect the city, to organize, to understand the thing that tied them all together: fire. Historians still argue whether such underground guild spaces existed in the Byzantine world. No official record mentions them. But stories whisper of places like this, where trade met tradition, where community was stronger than bureaucracy, where survival meant more than a license. You light a second candle and move along the wall, studying the markings. One drawing shows a baker pulling a child from a burning home. Another shows an oven exploding. Too much pressure, maybe. Another still is just a list of names under the heading, those who held the line. You and Mikhail don't speak. You don't need to. This is yours now. Part of your bakery. Part of your story. You spend the rest of the day cleaning it, quietly, carefully. You don't tell Eustratius yet. Not because you don't trust him, but because this feels personal. Like a secret passed hand to hand, through flour-dusted palms and singed fingertips. By nightfall, the room is clean enough to walk through without coughing. You even uncover a small bronze plaque buried under rubble. It reads, "To the fire tenders, the city sleeps because you don't." You take it upstairs and hang it above the oven. Eustratius doesn't say anything, just raises an eyebrow and nods. Maybe he's always known. From that day on, you start something new. Each week, after the last loaf is sold and the last coal goes cold, you descend to the chamber and... The next morning, the city buzzes with anticipation, not for bread or basil or sea trout, but for the punishment. Word has spread fast, faster than usual, which is impressive considering the average information pipeline in Constantinople involves a baker's wife, a stable boy, and a man who sells cucumbers shaped like saints. Everyone knows where to be and when. You don't want to go, truly, deeply want to avoid it, but you go, because everyone does. It's not at the Hippodrome or some grand plaza, but in the open square near the burned-out remains of the Chalkgate Bakery. The perfect theatrical backdrop, blackened stone, fallen timbers, a pile of ruined flour sacks still faintly smelling of wet ash. You push through the crowd, past vendors selling roasted chickpeas and moral superiority. Mikhail is beside you, chewing something unidentifiable and muttering, "This feels wrong. This whole thing smells wrong, and not just the chickpeas." The accused baker stands on a low platform, surrounded by city officials in robes that seem aggressively unstained for this early in the day. He's a small man, older than you expected. His hands tremble, and he stares at the ground like he's already halfway into it. A city herald steps forward and begins to read from a scroll. The usual formalities: accusations of negligence, violation of hearth codes, failure to maintain proper water storage. Then comes the judgment. Exile from the guild, closure of the bakery, public shaming. 1 month of mandatory cistern duty, cleaning the public water troughs with a spoon and a bad attitude. A murmur ripples through the crowd. That last bit wasn't written on the scroll. Someone probably added it for flair. The baker doesn't protest, just nods once and walks away, flanked by guards. Someone throws a rotten fig. It misses and hits a soldier, who sighs like this has happened before. The crowd disperses, disappointed in the lack of spectacle. You stand there a little longer, staring at the ruins of his shop. There's a loaf, charred and forgotten, still sitting on the edge of the windowsill. You wonder what it was meant for, who it was shaped for. "That could have been us," Mikhail says, softly. You nod. It almost was. Back at your own bakery, things feel quieter. Even the oven seems subdued, its heat more reluctant, like it doesn't want to be noticed. You shape your loaves more carefully, check the woodpile for the 3rd time. Add extra water to the buckets, even though it's a dry day. Eustratius doesn't say much, but he moves slower, checks the chimney twice, even wraps a wet cloth around the handle of the long bread paddle, just in case. "I don't like it," he finally mutters. You don't need to ask what it is. The feeling, that creeping suspicion, that maybe this isn't about fire at all, that maybe someone wanted that baker gone, that maybe rules were just tools, and sometimes the match wasn't dropped by accident. You hear a lot of things in the days that follow. Someone says the baker was behind on taxes. Another says he'd refuse to join a merchant's cooperative with suspiciously deep pockets. Someone else claims he was having an affair with a senator's wife and that the fire was divine justice. Historians would later argue whether fire regulations in Byzantine cities were genuinely about safety or just another layer of politics and control. The truth is probably both. But for bakers like you, truth is a luxury. All you have is the heat, the dough, the wood, and your instincts. And yours are buzzing like a beehive. So you start to prepare. Not for another fire, for a visit. It's subtle at first. Men in cloaks walking slowly past your shop, noticing things, measuring things. One pauses to count your buckets. Another accidentally drops a coin just to peek under your table. Mikhail starts to sleep with one eye open and a ladle under his pillow. "You think they're coming for us next?" he asks one night, voice barely a whisper. You don't answer. You don't have to. Instead, you clean everything, sharpen the bread knives, reinforce the oven seams again with fresh clay and bits of tile from an old mosaic no one claimed. You make peace with the idea that you might, at any time, be blamed for something you didn't do. But then, nothing happens. A week passes, then two. You're shaping dough the next morning when a customer leans across the counter and says, "Did you hear about the baker near the chalk gate?" You glance up, hands still working the dough. What about him? Burned down his own shop on purpose. Mikhail, nearby, drops a pan. You raise an eyebrow. Why would anyone do that? Insurance, the customer whispers, like it's a spell. Or revenge, depends who you ask. He collects his loaf and disappears before you can press him for details. It's not the first time you've heard this kind of rumor, and it certainly won't be the last. Fires have a way of warping truth in Constantinople. They happen so frequently, so unpredictably, that people naturally start looking for meaning, patterns, scapegoats, convenient enemies. This city doesn't just burn, it gossips about it afterward. You ask around throughout the morning. Other bakers, the fishmonger, even the man who sharpens shears near the monastery. Everyone's heard something. No two stories are the same. He owed money to a senator. He had a fight with his flour supplier. His apprentice ran off with his wife, so he set the oven alight out of grief. Or passion, someone adds helpfully. Historians still debate whether arson was a widespread problem in the later Byzantine Empire or just a convenient excuse for structural failure. Some surviving edicts suggest it was common enough to warrant harsh penalties. Others claim it was overblown, an easy way for failing merchants to explain away disaster and disappear into a different quarter. But in the minds of your fellow citizens, it's gospel. Some fires just aren't accidents. You spend the afternoon paranoid. You check the woodpile twice, move the olive oil jar further from the hearth, stare at Mikhail when he gets too close to the flue with a candle. "Why are you looking at me like that?" he asks, holding a basket of raisins. "Just making sure. Making sure I'm not planning to commit culinary arson?" "Exactly." He rolls his eyes and goes back to sorting dried fruit. Still, the unease lingers, not just for you, for everyone. There's a tension in the streets. You can feel it in the way people glance at rooftops now, as though expecting smoke to snake out at any moment. You can hear it in the lowered voices at the bathhouse, the unusually large crowds at the shrines, the murmurs about divine punishment. It doesn't help that the weather's gone dry again. Windy, brittle, the kind of air that makes cloth feel like tinder. It's the worst fire weather. The sky is pale and stretched thin, the clouds offering no promise of rain. In the evening, a new rumor arrives like an unwanted guest. They're going to punish the baker, says a fish vendor, publicly for negligence. No trial, you ask? Just a decree. The emperor wants an example. You feel your stomach drop. Negligence. That's the word that haunts every baker. It doesn't matter how careful you are, how many buckets you keep, or how many goats you save. If something burns and your name's anywhere near it, you're in danger. The worst story you've ever heard is about a baker who was chained to his own oven while it was bricked up. Eustratius claims it's an exaggeration. Mikhail says it's poetic justice. You think it's terrifying. You sit late that night, the bakery dark, except for the last embers glowing in the oven. The heat pulses gently, casting a flickering glow on the walls. You wrap yourself in your cloak and stare into the orange heart of the fire, thinking, could you ever leave? The thought arrives uninvited, as most dangerous thoughts do. You've lived your whole life in this city, rising before dawn, hands deep in flour, face flushed with heat and ash. But what would it be like to walk away? Start a small bakery in the provinces, a quiet village, somewhere with wide roads and fewer combustibles, where fire brigade means 2 sleepy farmers with a bucket and an angry goose. You picture it for a moment, and then the city coughs. By the time market day arrives, you're exhausted in the bones. Not the kind of tired that a nap or a fig pastry can cure. This is deeper. The kind that settles into your ribs and just hums. You've baked every day since the last fire, patched the oven twice, and even helped carry water to a neighbor whose roof tiles still hiss when it rains. Now, you stand outside the tribunal hall, adjusting your belt for the 15th time and trying not to sweat through your only clean tunic. Mikhail is beside you, holding a small offering loaf, sweetened with raisins shaped like a dove, allegedly symbolic of peace or innocence or please don't fine us into oblivion. He offers it to you. You want to hold it? You shake your head. You made it. I panicked and put 6 raisins in the dove's eye. You take it anyway. The tribunal chamber isn't as dramatic as you imagined. No marble statues glaring down, no incense swirling ominously. Just a stone room with 3 officials seated behind a desk and 1 scribe who looks like he's been taking notes since the days of Emperor Theophilus. One of the judges, a woman with ink-stained fingers and a surprisingly sharp gaze, gestures for you to speak. Your throat is dry. You explain everything. The fire was not started in your bakery. You were at the silversmith's quarter helping douse it, and if anything, your cracked oven stayed admirably not on fire the whole time. She listens. The other 2 murmur to each other. One yawns. The scribe sneezes directly into a scroll. Then comes the moment you've been dreading. A witness. Of course, it's the goat's owner. He stands, eyes wild, gesturing dramatically. I saw the bakery goat near the fire, flames licking at his hooves. His eyes were glowing red, a beast of fire. You stare at him. The goat, you say flatly? You mean the one we rescued? That one? He squints. Could be. The judges glance at each other. Do you have proof the fire began at your shop? The ink-fingered woman asks him. He opens his mouth, closes it, shrugs. Goat proof. There's a moment of silence. Then the scribe breaks into laughter, wheezing, unfiltered laughter that fills the room and makes even the judges smile a little. The ink-fingered woman waves her hand. Dismissed. Baseless claim. Just like that, you exhale for what feels like the first time in a week. You're cleared. No fines, no loss of license, no fire goat curse. You leave the tribunal lightheaded. Mikhail bounces down the steps beside you, already unwrapping the offering loaf to eat it in celebration. We should start baking these fire loaves, lucky doves. Lucky goats, you mutter. The city feels brighter as you walk back. The market is in full swing now, voices echoing off stone, fabrics fluttering, spices perfuming the air. A girl sings in one corner while her brother sells figs 2 at a time. Someone's reciting a poem about cinnamon. There's even a man juggling lemons for no apparent reason. Back at the bakery, Eustratius is waiting with a raised eyebrow. "Well?" he asks. You toss him the tribunal seal. "Still bakers." He grunts and turns back to the dough as if he never doubted you for a second. You roll up your sleeves. There's bread to shape. Still, the experience has left a sourness in your gut. The accusation, even if it was ridiculous, lingers. This time it was a goat and some oil-soaked baskets. Next time, it could be worse. Next time, the flames might reach your oven. And so you do something you've never done before. That night, after the last loaf is sold and the goat has been returned to its highly suspicious owner with a firm lecture on tail safety, you stay behind, alone, in the bakery. You light a single lamp, crouch by the oven, and inspect every inch. The patched crack is holding, for now. The base is solid, but old. You scrape off some of the soot, run your hands along the seams, knock softly to check for hollow spots. Then you do something even stranger. You talk to it. Not aloud, not fully, just a whisper in your head, a quiet acknowledgement. You and the oven are in this together. If it stays steady, so will you. If it betrays you, well, you'll patch it again. Because this isn't just about bread. It never was. It's about the rhythm, the fire, the city, the people who need their loaves even while their world flickers at the edges. And you? You're a baker. And, whether you like it or not, a firefighter too. You wipe the soot from your hands, stretch your aching back, and step into the cool night. Tomorrow will come, and so will the next morning. You feel it before you open your eyes. That slow, aching stiffness in your limbs, the kind that only comes from dragging buckets, hauling goats, and dodging flaming awnings. Your back protests as you sit up on your straw mat. Your shoulder gives a theatrical crack. Even your hair feels sore. How is that possible? Outside, Constantinople hums. The city has already begun its clattering ritual of waking. Roosters crowing, shutters banging open, carts squeaking on stone. You catch a whiff of smoke on the breeze, but this time it's just from breakfast fires, legitimate ones, where no walls are collapsing and no animals are ablaze. You shuffle downstairs into the bakery, where Mikhail is already trying to open a sack of flour with his teeth. He sees you and holds up a roll. "It's a little overbaked," he says. "Still good." You take it. It is, in fact, rock hard, but you gnaw at it anyway. Fuel. Eustratius is humming, a rare sound, and shaping dough with a speed and confidence that suggests he didn't spend the previous day running into burning buildings. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he just watched from the doorway and yelled helpful phrases like, "More water," and "Stop throwing bread at it." The three of you settle into your rhythm. Dough kneaded, oven stoked, loaves arranged. Outside, the city yawns, stretches, and begins another loop around its own chaos. And then, without warning, your neighbor's goat walks in. Just strolls into the shop like it owns the place, tail half singed but head held high. It looks at you, you look at it. Mikhail drops his bowl. Not again. Apparently, during yesterday's excitement, the poor creature escaped permanent custody. Now it's adopted you. You try to shoo it. It chews on your apron. You push it gently. It headbutts the flour sack. Eventually, Eustratius ties it to the doorpost with a piece of spare rope. "Until its owner comes," he mutters, "or it starts baking." Outside, The mood in the street is more subdued than usual. People talk in hushed tones, point to the blackened stones near the silversmiths, exchange theories. There's always a theory. This time, the talk is particularly bizarre. Someone saw a monk lighting incense under a wine cart. No, it was a ghost. The goat saw it. It's a message from the emperor. You don't correct any of them, because that's how stories spread in Constantinople. Wild, strange, self-replicating. You've learned that people need explanations, even if they're absurd, especially if they're absurd. A fire caused by oil and heat is dull. A fire caused by vengeful saints or rebellious geese, now that's something people can talk about over lentil stew. And the goat? It becomes a legend within the hour. By mid-morning, someone paints a little icon of the goat above their stall. By noon, a man is selling miniature goat charms for fire protection. You're not sure whether to laugh or weep. Then, in the midst of this absurdity, something less amusing happens. A tax official arrives. Tall, pale, wearing a belt with too many keys and a face like curdled milk. He enters the bakery with a wax tablet and a stylus, already shaking his head. "We've received a report," he begins. Of course you have. Apparently, someone accused your bakery of being the origin of the fire. No evidence, just a rumor, born from smoke and stress. It's not surprising. The fire was close enough, and your shop is known. Too known. You try to explain. So does Eustratius. Mikhail offers him a slightly stale muffin. The official writes things down very slowly, as if each word is a burden. He eyes the crack in the oven, still patched with clay, and scratches something extra onto his tablet. "You'll need to appear before the district tribunal," he says, "next market day." And just like that, the weight in your chest deepens. Because in this city, guilt is sticky, and fires bring blame like smoke brings ash. You could be fined, censured, worst of all, expelled from the guild. And if that happens, no bacon, no selling, no place in the city's rhythm. You sit down heavily, your half-formed loaf slumping in your hands. The oven crackles behind you. The goat bleats softly. Mikhail says nothing for a long time. Then, "I could bribe someone." You almost laugh. With what? Bread and sarcasm? He shrugs. "Might work." Eustratius sighs. "No, we go. We explain. We tell them the truth." You nod slowly, but you know it's dusk when it happens. The light shifts, subtly at first. Golden edges soften, shadows lengthen, and Constantinople begins its slow, sighing transformation into evening. It's your favorite time of day. The city quiets a little. The crowds thin. The clamor mellows into a hum. Street dogs curl into corners. The fairy horns across the Golden Horn let out long, yawning calls. Even the seagulls seem more philosophical at dusk. You've just pulled your last batch of loaves from the oven, crisp, warm, crackling slightly as they cool. You and Mikhail have cleaned the bench, swept the floor, and set aside 2 sesame twists as a reward for not dying today. You bite into yours, the crust giving way with that satisfying crunch that somehow makes all the sweat and smoke worthwhile. And then, because of course it does, the quiet breaks. A scream, then 2, and then shouting. You both freeze. You know that tone, that pitch of voice that says not an argument, not a mugging, not someone mad about a bad fig, but panic. You're already moving. Down the alley, past the old mosaic shop, around the cracked fountain, your feet know the way even before your brain registers the details. There's a crowd gathering at the edge of the district. Smoke curls into the sky like an accusation. A cart's on fire. Not just any cart, a market cart filled with amphorae, some of which are leaking something that smells distinctly flammable. The fire has already spread to a nearby awning. The fabric, likely waxed for waterproofing, goes up fast. Too fast. This is different. This is fast. You shove your way into the fray. The cart owner is weeping into his hands. Someone's yelling about sabotage again, and no one's actually doing anything. You grab a bucket from a nearby stoop. It's half full of something vaguely oily, but it'll have to do. Mikhail arrives panting behind you. Again? He groans. Yes, you say, again. Together, you douse the flames licking up the stone wall behind the cart. It hisses, coughs steam, and then flares again. Some oil must have spilled. You yank down the burning awning with your hook pole. It collapses onto the street in a smoky heap. Someone screams. You turn to see what might be the strangest thing yet today. A goat on fire. Not entirely, just the tail. But it's galloping through the street in a panic, knocking over baskets, trailing smoke like a tragic parade float. Mikhail blinks. Is that? Get the goat, you say. What? Get the goat. He runs off, shouting apologies to a startled spice vendor as he disappears after the animal, flailing with a blanket. You, meanwhile, help organize the chaos. Other bakers are showing up. Callistos from the hill, grumpy Demetrios from the harbor, even Phaedra, the widow who runs the tiny pastry stall, and once claimed to chase off a thief with a rolling pin. You form a loose fire line, passing buckets from a nearby cistern, yelling over each other, pulling down more flammable awnings before they can catch. It's rough work. Your hands are already raw. Your eyes sting from the smoke. But it's working. The flames are receding. A few soldiers show up late, looking confused, then decide the best course of action is to stand in a row and look important. One points at the goat, which Mikhail is now dragging back triumphantly, its tail wrapped in a wet tunic. You've never seen Mikhail look more proud. Eventually, the fire dies. Just like that. Well, not just like that. It takes effort, coordination, bruised elbows, a heroic baker, and a mildly traumatized goat. But still, the flames fade, leaving only scorched stone, melted baskets, and a lingering scent of cooked figs and fur. You slump against a wall, breathing hard. The crowd disperses with that particular shrug of urban acceptance that only long-time Constantinopolitans can master. A shrug that says, well, that happened. Time for dinner. Someone offers you a slice of cheese. You take it. And as you chew, staring up at the first stars peeking out over the city's domes and towers, you realize something. The city doesn't sleep. Not really. It just shifts from one kind of danger to another. Day fires, night fires, kitchen fires, political fires. The Nika riots. People still whisper about those like they happened yesterday. Half the city burned, and yet the bakeries kept baking. Bread must go on. And you? You're part of that rhythm, that resilience, that weird, slightly scorched heartbeat of the empire. By now, your tunic is equal parts sweat, flour, and soot. You smell like someone tried to roast bread in a spice market during a thunderstorm. But your oven is stable, the dough is rising again, and you have, miraculously, not lost a single eyebrow today. That's when the knock comes. Not a gentle tap either, a sharp rap that suggests urgency, importance, or someone who's never been taught basic door etiquette. You open the door and find two men in crimson cloaks, each bearing the unmistakable insignia of the Periscopi, the fire watchers of the city. Not an official rank exactly, not like the Navy or the Guard, more like a civic tradition, a kind of neighborhood fire militia composed of men from various trades, woodworkers, leatherworkers, and of course, bakers. One of them, tall, with a face like a sun-dried fig, nods curtly. You're coming with us. There's a flare-up in the silversmith quarter. You resist the urge to groan. The silversmiths are infamous for their workshop fires. Charcoal pits, molten metals, wax molds, they practically dare fire to show up. They've burned their own street at least 3 times in your lifetime, each time blaming faulty lamp oil or the wrong kind of wind. You glance at Eustratius. He's already fetching the long pole and tossing you a damp kerchief. "Go," he says, "and if they offer you wine, say yes, they've got good stuff." You and Mikhail grab the usual gear, buckets, hooks, soaked cloth, and follow the crimson cloaks down the winding alleys toward the edge of the artisan district. The city shifts as you move. The buildings here are tighter, stacked like crates, each with its own little lean. You swear one shop has moved slightly since last week. Along the way, other periscopi join, some in aprons, some in tunics, one carrying a basket of figs for reasons unknown. It's an informal force, cobbled together more from necessity than planning. There's no real leadership, no standard training, and definitely no drills. Historians still argue whether the periscopi were ever officially sanctioned by the imperial administration or just tolerated as long as they didn't cause more fires than they stopped. Most agree they were critical during large blazes, quick to respond, well-positioned, and occasionally too enthusiastic with their poles. The silversmith street is a mess when you arrive. Smoke curls lazily from an open window. A fire has taken hold in the rear of one of the workshops, blackening the stone above it. You can smell burned metal, singed linen, and something that might once have been a tapestry. The silversmith himself is in the street, waving a pair of tongs and yelling something about sabotage. "Third time this month," he cries. "The gods are testing me." "Maybe the gods want you to move your coal bins," someone mutters. You dive in. The fire hasn't spread far yet, but the rear room is a tinderbox. Mikhail throws a bucket over a curtain that sizzles and collapses like wet paper. You use the hook pole to bring down a cracked rafter, and water sprays from someone's overturned amphora like a clumsy blessing. They're shouting, steam, a lot of bad advice. "Cover the floor in sand." "No, salt." "Try yelling at it." You focus on the rhythm. Move, throw, duck, repeat. The heat presses against your skin, not burning, just relentless, like a relative who won't stop telling the same story. Eventually, the flames die. You're left panting in the haze, clothes damp, hands scraped, and hair full of God knows what. The silversmith offers you a cloth soaked in wine. You press it to your forehead and sigh. "Well done," one of the cloaked periscopi says, clapping you on the back. Quick response. You shrug. "We were just baking." He grins. That's how it always starts. The fire watchers linger a bit longer, checking for hot spots, grumbling about the city's building codes, which are, at best, suggestions. Someone jokes that the silversmith should switch to glass. No one laughs. On the way back, Mikhail is quieter than usual. "I didn't think I'd be doing this when I joined the bakery," he says eventually. "I thought it'd be, I don't know, baking, not dodging flaming rafters." You nod. The job description leaves that part out. But that's how it is in Constantinople. You bake in the morning, fight fire in the afternoon, and hopefully still have enough strength to knead dough by nightfall. There's no neat division, no boundaries between trades and emergencies. Everyone is a little bit everything. It's strange, really, how normalized it's become. You've seen carpenters carrying fire poles, brewers tossing buckets, even a poet once flinging water with wild abandon and rhyming mid-sprint. You'd think, after all these near misses, someone would invent a better oven. But no, yours is the same as every other bakery in Constantinople. An old design, low and wide, shaped like an overturned cauldron with an attitude problem. It's lined with blackened bricks that have absorbed centuries of bread, sweat, and whispered insults. It works, most of the time. And on days like this, that's enough. Still, as you kneel to stoke the coals, you can't help eyeing it with a touch of suspicion. The walls of the oven hum faintly with retained heat, pulsing like a patient beast. You prod the embers with a metal rod, watching as little puffs of ash leap upward, swirling like gray snow. It's beautiful in a way, dangerous beauty, like a Byzantine widow with a dagger behind her back. The city's fire inspectors insist that ovens be positioned properly, set against a brick wall, kept a safe distance from wooden shelves, cleared of buildup weekly. You laugh at that last one. No baker has time for weekly cleaning unless they've given up on making actual bread, or sleeping, or breathing. Eustratius claims the oven is fireproofed. He points at the tiled floor, the curved brick dome, the lead-lined chimney. The safest in the district, he'll boast, usually after something nearby has burned to the ground. You're not so sure. Historians still debate just how much fireproofing was standard in these workshops. Some say advanced clay compounds were used. Others argue that faith was the primary insulator. Either way, superstition makes a decent backup plan. Your oven has two tiny charms nailed to its edge. One a bronze cross, the other a carved wooden fish. You don't know who put them there, you don't dare remove them. Mikhail, still dusty and recovering from the beet fiasco, crouches beside you with a worried expression. It smells weird again. You sniff. Smoke, ash, maybe a hint of fennel. It always smells weird. No, I mean like cooking socks. You sigh and check the chimney. A small bird has nested in the flue again. Just one, perched indignantly atop a bit of cloth it's stolen from someone's laundry. You wave a stick. It doesn't move. You bang the stick. It flaps once, hurls an acorn at you, and leaves. You clear the flue. Problem solved. Sort of. You turn back to the oven and test the heat by tossing in a bit of scrap dough. It bubbles, blisters, and darkens perfectly. Good. Temperatures are stable. For now. Then you notice something else. A hairline crack running along the base near the back wall. Small, but new, and dangerously close to the wood storage shelf. You crouch and run your finger along it, tracing the line like a fault in the earth. Your stomach tightens. This is how it starts sometimes. A little gap, a weak spot, a hidden ember that slips through and finds a pile of kindling no one meant to leave behind. You dust the crack with flour to monitor it, an old trick. If the flour darkens or disappears, you'll know it's leaking heat. And then you sit back and really think. What happens if your oven causes a fire? It wouldn't matter that you're the one who helped put out 2 blazes just this morning. Wouldn't matter that you deliver to the widow, the priest, the emperor's secretary's second cousin. If a fire starts in your shop, you're to blame. Byzantine laws are murky on this, but stories abound. One baker allegedly caused a fire that destroyed 3 blocks and was sentenced to have his bakery torn down with him still inside. Another, less dramatically, was stripped of his guild membership and forced to sell turnips for the rest of his life, a fate arguably worse than death. Historians still argue whether these punishments were ever officially codified or just the stuff of moralistic storytelling. Either way, you've heard them since you were a child. You believe them enough to keep a pail of water beside the oven, even when it's dry season. You stand up slowly, brushing flour from your knees. Eustratius watches you from the doorway, one brow raised. "Crack?" he asks. You nod. He grunts, steps over, peers at it for a moment, then shrugs. "It'll hold." That's not exactly reassuring. "Probably," he adds. "Better." You patch the gap for now with a paste of clay and crushed brick. Temporary, but it might buy you a few weeks. Then you take stock of the wood pile. The dry stuff is too close. You and Mikhail move it farther from the oven, grumbling all the while. And as you do, you think about just how many fires in this city probably start this way. Not with arson or riots or lightning, just someone tired, distracted, leaving wood too close to the flame. Just one overlooked ember, one dry splinter. That's the real danger in Constantinople. Not war, not invasion, not even politics. Complacency. You remember deliveries, right? Because even when a third of your day's been spent hauling buckets, guiding grandmothers out of burning workshops, and dodging flying pickled beets, the city still expects its bread on time. You and Mikhail gather the loaves, what's left of them anyway, into 2 worn wicker baskets. Most are still warm, a few are a little singed, and one looks like it was shaped during an earthquake, but you tuck it under the others and move on. No one inspects bread too closely when their curtains are still smoldering. The streets are even busier now. It's that loud, sweaty stretch of late morning when everyone suddenly remembers errands they were supposed to run 3 days ago. Linen vendors shout over fishmongers. Someone's dragging a goat who clearly doesn't want to be involved. And everywhere, the same background music. The soft clinking of coins, the dull thud of wooden wheels, and the distant cough of a city still full of smoke. You cut through the side alleys, faster than braving the main road. The smells shift as you move. Basil and crushed fig, a hint of burned wool still clinging to the air. Mikhail, trailing behind you, is muttering something about voluntary firefighting wages, which is rich, considering you both just got paid in 2 fish and a thank you nod. Your first stop is the small chapel near the cisterns. The priest there is always oddly awake, as if he never actually sleeps, just stands in the shadows and quietly judges the passing carts. He opens the door with a soft creak, incense trailing behind him. 2 loaves, he says, like it's part of a sacred rite. You pass them over. He inspects them, sniffs once, nods. A single coin changes hands, a tiny copper thing that might be older than the chapel itself. Smelled fire, he mutters. Divine warning? Or a knocked-over lamp, you reply, too tired for theology. The priest hums in a way that suggests agreement, or possibly indigestion, and disappears back into the incense fog. Next is the widow near the market square. Always 2 sesame rolls and a long story about her late husband who once outran a mob during the Nika riots with nothing but sandals and a string of garlic. She claims he survived by pretending to be a fish seller. You nod politely, as always, and don't ask questions. Then a stop at the bathhouse. A trickier delivery, since half the time you're forced to hand over the loaves while dodging towel-clad aristocrats who think bread delivery is a flirtation ritual. You pass a round barley loaf through the door, hear a giggle, and retreat before it escalates into poetry. All the while, the city murmurs around you. You overhear whispers about the fires. Some say it was started by accident. Others claim it was political. That a certain faction wanted to clear space for a new shrine. That a rival merchant paid a boy to knock over a lamp. That it was divine punishment for someone eating eggs on a fast day. Historians still argue whether these rumors helped maintain social order or stirred it up further. In reality, everyone believes a little of both. Rumors in Constantinople are like air, always circulating, always half true, and impossible to pin down. By noon, you're back at the bakery. The oven's cooled a little, and the air inside the shop is finally breathable again. Eustratius is asleep on a stool, his mouth slightly open, a smear of ash across his forehead like an accidental blessing. You sit at the bench, rubbing the soot from your forearms, and for a moment there's peace. Real, honest peace. The kind that only comes after chaos, when nothing needs to be done for the next 5 minutes, when no one's screaming about goats or gods or underbaked crusts. And then, because the city has a sense of humor, you hear the horn. It's not the fire bell. This one's lower, slower, the kind of sound that suggests emergency, but in a more bureaucratic way. You groan. Eustratius snorts awake, blinking wildly. "Inspection," he says, rubbing his eyes. "Right, the prefect's fire safety team. They show up irregularly, which is to say, just often enough to be annoying, never often enough to be useful. Today's team is led by a man in an impressively unscorched tunic, flanked by 2 assistants carrying scrolls and expressions of mild superiority. The inspector enters the bakery with a nose already wrinkled, as if offended by your very existence. "You're the baker here?" he asks, peering at you as though unsure whether humans are capable of holding dough. "Sometimes," you reply. He doesn't laugh. He starts with the usual nonsense. Chimney height, water supply, proximity to neighboring buildings. He taps your oven with a... This time, it's not the tanneries, it's worse. You're sprinting up a narrow alley toward the North Quarter, where the buildings are packed tighter, the streets twist like knots, and the houses lean inward like they're gossiping about each other. The air here is thicker. Smoke's already spilling over the rooftops, curling through window shutters and dancing its wicked little spiral into the early afternoon haze. Your lungs burn before you even see the flames. Mikhail is beside you, breath hitching. Eustratius, somehow, is still ahead, his legs deceptively quick for a man who curses stairs like they're sentient. The pole bounces on his back with each step, and he mutters something about bloody roof beams and fools with oil lamps. You turn the corner and nearly collide with chaos. It's a weaving workshop this time, the kind that stores extra wool in the attic near the lamps. You don't need to be a fire whisperer to know how that ends. The flames are already licking the eaves, a line of terrified neighbors trying to pass water from a dry fountain that looks more decorative than functional. Some are using clay bowls, one's using a helmet, another's just yelling. You jump in without a word. The rhythm of the fire line is different every time. This one is clumsy, full of panic and dropped buckets. You pass a jug to a merchant who smells like wine and fear. He nods, dumps it too far from the blaze, and immediately apologizes to the fire. You don't have time to explain that flames don't accept apologies. There's a boy on a rooftop trying to slap the fire with a rug. He's making it worse. You cup your hands and shout, "Down! Get down!" He doesn't hear, or pretends not to. Typical. It's at this moment, mid-bucket toss, sweat pouring down your spine, that you remember what day it is. Market day, which means the hippodrome's packed, the roads are blocked with stalls, and the fire wagons, if any exist in theory, definitely aren't getting through. Byzantine emergency infrastructure at its finest. Some cities have dedicated fire teams. Rome, for example, had the Vigilis. Constantinople? Not so much. You've got citizens, maybe some soldiers if they're bored, but no brass helmets, no red wagons, no dramatic music. Historians still argue whether this was a philosophical choice, leaning on civic duty, or just a failure of planning. But either way, the result is the same. You, a baker, putting out fires with a bucket and a prayer. And the prayer? Optional. You duck into the alley behind the shop. The flames are crawling like vines across the wood frames, greedy and patient. Eustratius slams the pole against a support beam, and it gives way in a plume of sparks. You jump back, shielding your face. Mikhail trips into a crate of pickled beets. They splatter. He swears in 3 languages and starts flinging them at the base of the fire. To be fair, it does smell better now. Inside the house, you glimpse someone, an old woman, clutching a brass censer like it's going to exorcise the fire. You rush in, ducking low, yelling for her to follow. She blinks, then nods, shuffling after you with surprising speed. Smoke wraps around you both like a scarf knitted by an arsonist. You cough, guiding her out, just as part of the ceiling lets go with a groan. Outside, the others cheer weakly. Another rescue, another breath. Someone offers you a cup of water. You drink half, pour the rest on your head. Mikhail hands you a beet. You shake your head. But the fire's weakening. It's lost momentum. Too many soaked walls, too many determined neighbors. One woman's attacking it with a fish wrapped in wet cloth. You don't ask. Eventually, the flames fade. They never vanish completely, just shrink until they're more memory than monster. The crowd begins to shift into its secondary form, spectators, pointing, debating, blaming. "Must have been the lamp boy," someone says. No, the wool was stacked too high. Why do they keep so many baskets near the stove? Your favorite, clearly divine punishment for bad weaving. Eustratius groans. Here we go again. Because of course, fires always have causes, and those causes are rarely practical ones. It's either God, politics, or that one suspicious neighbor with the weird sandals. There's a long-standing superstition about fire in Constantinople. It isn't just physical, it's moral. Some believe that flames are heaven's way of cleaning the slate. Others think they're divine judgment for improper iconography or buying spoiled lentils during Lent. You've heard it all. One time, a man claimed his bakery caught fire because he accidentally baked a loaf in the shape of the emperor's nose. Another claimed his house was spared because he smeared olive oil over the doorway. The dough responds to your touch as if nothing happened, as if you didn't just pull half of a collapsing wall onto your shoulder, as if your sleeve isn't still smoldering faintly at the elbow. Your hands move from instinct now, pinching, folding, dusting. They say muscle memory is a gift from the gods, and you're not in the mood to argue with divinity today. Outside, the smoke hangs like a memory. Not thick enough to be dangerous now, just enough to tint the air like someone smudged charcoal across the sky. The tannery blaze is over, and yet the whole street hums with that peculiar kind of tension that comes after disaster, like everyone's waiting to see if anything else catches. You, however, are back to your dough. Your oven needs feeding. The loaves must rise. The neighborhood's slowly returning to its pre-fire rhythm. A butcher 2 doors down sharpens his knives with a melody that sounds suspiciously like a hymn. A trio of boys runs past barefoot, hollering something about a goose uprising. Again. And from upstairs, your neighbor coughs like a man who's been yelling since the iconoclast controversy, which, in his case, might be true. The truth is, Constantinople is always on edge, always teetering between grandeur and catastrophe. Even the stone feels tense, like it's waiting for an excuse to crumble. You step outside the bakery for a moment, letting the heat of the oven press against your back as the cooler breeze brushes your face. The contrast is soothing, like you're sandwiched between 2 moods. The street glows with that golden post-fire light. Soot clings to the edges of the buildings like eyeliner on a tired noble. The irony doesn't escape you. This city, built mostly of stone, behaves like it's made of straw. Fires shouldn't spread this fast here, not with walls that could stop a battering ram. But fires don't respect walls. They go up. They leap across rooftops. They jump from timber balconies and stretch across clotheslines like acrobats. The real danger isn't the street, it's the second floors. See, most buildings here are stone on the bottom, strong, cool, serious. But the upper stories? Wood, plaster, open windows with curtains flapping like taunts at the gods. And that's where the people live, where they hang their laundry, light their lamps, and forget to put out their incense. So when fire comes, it doesn't creep through doorways. It dances across rooftops like it's late to a party. You make your way back to the oven, stepping around puddles that still steam faintly. Mikhail is sitting on a stool, dazed, gnawing the corner off what might be yesterday's loaf or a chunk of decorative plaster. Hard to tell. He blinks up at you. "Why is it always near the tanneries?" he asks, his mouth still full. You shrug. Historians still argue whether it was due to the fats and chemicals or just the famously bad tempers of the tanners. Either way, the quarters burned more times than the Senate's changed its mind. You stoke the oven with a careful hand. The coals shift, glowing softly. There's comfort in that glow, a kind of predictable warmth that you can control. Unlike, well, everything else in this city. The bakery settles again. Loaves go in, some come out. The table becomes a battlefield of flour and crumbs. The air smells rich again, no longer scorched, just toasty. It's easy to pretend nothing happened. But it did. You glance around your shop. The buckets stacked by the door, the damp blankets hanging to dry, the hook pole leaning just within reach. These things aren't accidents. They're part of your workspace, part of your life. You are a baker, yes, but you are also, unofficially, untrained, and unpaid, a first responder. Not that anyone thanks you or pays you extra, but that's the Byzantine way. Duty is woven into the bread. The city officials will probably arrive later, inspectors with serious faces and excellent cloaks. They'll poke at the burnt rubble, scribble notes with frayed quills, and blame someone who doesn't have enough influence to defend themselves. And the tanneries will rebuild, again. There's a saying among bakers: fire feeds the gods, but bread feeds the people. You're not sure where it started, but it fits. You feed both, whether you want to or not. A neighbor pops his head in, a crooked smile on his face and a singed cap in his hand. "Loaf for the wife?" he asks. You nod and hand him one still warm from the oven. He holds it like it might heal something. He says quietly, "We saw you at the fire," he says. "Good work." You blink. That's as close to a medal as you're likely to get. And then the calm is broken. A scream. By the time the sun crests over the dome of the Hagia Sophia, your hair is dusted white with flour, and your apron, really just a sackcloth tied badly, has acquired a new collection of mysterious stains. You've been working for hours, even though most of the city is still yawning and scratching itself awake. But that's the life of a Byzantine baking apprentice. You rise when the stars are still blinking and sleep when your muscles forget how to argue. The shop is alive now. Your hands move without thinking, scooping, shaping, pinching edges into crescent rolls, and slicing lines into luck. There's a rhythm to it all, almost meditative, until Mikhail bumps into the side table and knocks a pan of barley dough onto the floor. He winces. You both freeze. Your master, Eustratius, lifts his eyes slowly, deliberately, like a man preparing to recite a eulogy. "One more," he mutters, "and you're grinding millet for soup sellers until Lent." The floor in a bakery is sacred, but not for any divine reason. It's where bits of the city end up. Dust, mouse footprints, possibly a lost tooth from the porter last week. You sweep the dough away quickly and promise to do better. Again. The ovens breathe in cycles, soft heat, then blistering waves. You learn to read them like moods. Is it a good bread day? Is the ash lying flat? Do the coals snap like they're ready for a fight? Today's a decent day, which means you might get away with minimal burns. Outside, the street is filling. The smells of garlic and crushed olives mingle with donkey sweat and the sour tang of wet wool. A procession of fishmongers hauls in the morning's catch from the Golden Horn. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks at a helmet. Not a person, just the helmet. Your bakery is tucked beneath an apartment block, a feature common in Byzantine neighborhoods. That means you get leaks when the neighbors dump their bathwater, but it also means you're part of the fabric of their lives. They shout orders from balconies. They lower coins in little baskets. Sometimes they gossip through the floorboards. "Did you hear?" whispers the widow from the second floor this morning, lowering a copper coin in a pouch. You grunt and pass her up a round of warm bread wrapped in fig leaves. Fires are so common, they're almost part of the weather report. Chance of clouds, strong breeze, 2 conflagrations before noon. But there's more to it than carelessness. Historians still argue whether some of the blazes were intentional, part of property disputes, factional violence, or even tax resistance. Burn a building, blame a rival, and walk away with clean hands. It's a dark theory, but not without precedent. Back in the shop, the oven hums. The firewood is stacked, mostly pine today, which sparks too much, but it was cheaper at the harbor. Mikhail is kneading dough with his entire body, face scrunched like a man arm wrestling a ghost. And you? You start shaping the ceremonial loaves. These are special, larger, often stamped with seals or religious symbols. They go to churches, monasteries, or wealthy patrons with egos as delicate as underbaked crust. One wrong shape, and someone accuses you of heresy, or worse, bad taste. Your fingers press the wooden seal into the dough, a faint cross surrounded by Greek letters. It's oddly satisfying, this little act of sacred vandalism. And a good way to practice not trembling, because when the bishop's servant arrives, he always inspects every detail like it's a crime scene. And then the door creaks open, and you catch a whiff of soot. Not the good kind, the "we have a problem" kind. Your stomach tightens. There's a certain scent when something's gone wrong in the city. It's not just smoke, it's fear, sweat, panic, and sometimes, oddly, boiled cabbage. You step outside, and sure enough, someone's running past yelling about fire near the tanneries. Again. Tanneries, with their vats of fat, chemicals, and misery, are infamous for catching fire. Add in a few careless lamps, and suddenly the street smells like smoked goat in the worst way. Your master sighs. "Keep baking," he says. "We're not in the path yet." Yet. The rule is simple. Until the fire comes to you, the loaves must rise. People need their bread. Fires come and go. But breakfast is sacred. And so you continue, dusting more flour onto the table, tapping dough into rounded forms. Your muscles move on autopilot now, the way they always do when anxiety sits in your chest like a heavy cat. You listen, you smell, you... Hey guys, tonight we're headed into the smoky heart of Constantinople, where your job as a humble Byzantine baker involves more than just dough, yeast, and trying not to sneeze into the flour. Because when the bread starts rising, so does the risk of fire. Imagine waking up to the smell of sweetened barley loaves and charred timber at the same time. That's the scent of your life in the Byzantine Empire. You stretch on your straw mat, eyelids heavy, your body already sore from yesterday's shift. Outside, the city is still quiet, but soon it will hum, creak, and groan like an overworked oven door. The stone streets absorb the dawn in violet gray tones. Chickens complain. Somewhere nearby, someone's trying to light a fire without kindling again, and the rhythmic tapping of a neighbor's pestle is your not-so-gentle wake-up call. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere unusual or it's some odd hour, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where all you night owls are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't have to walk far to smell the bakeries. Wood smoke curling lazily from chimneys, sweet spices in the air, cardamom maybe, or cinnamon. It's still half dark, and already the streets of Constantinople are shifting beneath their cloak of ash and promise. A mule clatters past you with jugs of olive oil. A barefoot child sells raisins from a dented brass tray. And you, sleepy-eyed, flour-smudged, with soot on your ankles, are heading to your oven. You work near the southern wall of the city, not far from the harbor, where fish stink in the afternoons and sea winds sneak through cracks in your shop's shutters. Your oven is built low into a curved wall, lined with stone, heavy with soot, and always faintly warm, like the breath of a resting dragon. It's a dangerous thing, that oven. More than one baker in your guild has lost an eyebrow, or worse, a livelihood. But the smell, oh, the smell. A mix of sourdough crust, burnt sesame seeds, and hot clay. It lures even the stiffest bureaucrats down from their ivory towers in the morning, clutching coins and muttering about crust consistency. Bakers in Byzantium are more important than you'd guess. You're not just someone who kneads dough and waits around. You're part of a guild, regulated by law, tied to state provisioning, watched by city prefects. Historians still argue whether the guilds held more sway in the marketplace or in the palace kitchens. Either way, if you don't bake, someone important gets very hangry. And speaking of hangry, you haven't eaten. You nibble a corner from a cracked barley loaf left from yesterday. It's tough enough to break a tooth, but better than nothing. Your fellow apprentice, Mikhail, stumbles in late again. His tunic is backward. Again. You hear about the fire in the Blikshurna quarter? He mumbles. Of course you did. Everyone did. Half the night the sky flickered orange. Someone's upper floor went up, and the wind did the rest. That's what happens when you build a whole neighborhood out of timber and tile and dry dreams. Your master, a wiry man named Eustradius with a beard like a broomhead, walks in with a pail of water and a suspiciously singed sleeve. He gives you both a look that says, "Don't ask." There's a reason you keep sand and water near the oven at all times. The city is mostly stone, but the roofs, wood. The carts, wood. The shutters, floors, awnings, ceiling beams, wood. And oil lamps don't ask permission before they tip over. You throw flour onto the work table. The day has started. Kneading dough might sound peaceful, and sometimes it is. The repetitive motion, the soft squish, the light crackle of the oven's heat stones, it can almost lull you into a trance. But the rhythm is always shadowed by risk. One dropped ember, one forgotten cloth near the flame, and your humble bakery becomes ground zero for the next great city fire. The irony, of course, is that your oven is also a city necessity. Bread isn't just food. It's politics, it's currency, it's stability. When fires take out bakeries, the people riot. When the loaves don't show up, someone gets blamed. And it's never the wind's fault. It's yours. In theory, there are inspectors, men who go around checking whether ovens are built to regulation, whether there's enough distance between shops, and whether chimneys are cleared. But they come at odd hours and leave quickly, usually with a loaf or two tucked under their cloaks. And that means half the time it's up to you to police your own embers, you and your fellow bakers. You don't just keep the oven hot, you also keep the buckets filled. The city even...
You don't hesitate. You wipe your hands on your apron, flour smearing into wet streaks, and grab the long-handled pole, the one with the iron hook at the end. It's not for pulling bread. It's for pulling down burning shutters, collapsing roof beams before they collapse on someone's head. Eustratius barks out instructions like a man who's done this more times than he's baked a good rye. Buckets, Mikhail, the rope. You, grab the soaked blankets. The bakery shifts instantly from warm domestic chaos to a kind of martial readiness. The fire bell continues, echoing through the alleys, clanging like some furious church bell that forgot its faith. You dash outside, and the early morning air bites your skin. The breeze carries smoke, thin, acrid, but building. You follow the others toward the danger. It's near the tanneries, like the girl from the balcony warned. Already, others are converging. Traders, monks, two drunk dock workers still chewing olives. Fires don't discriminate. They don't care if your robe is silk or patched burlap. And this one's already hungry. The tannery is up in flames. Orange tongues lick at the shutters. Someone's roof has collapsed inward, sending a puff of soot skyward like a reverse prayer. You and Mikhail take your places in a frantic bucket line. Leather sacks and amphora sloshing as water is passed hand to hand from the nearest cistern. It's chaos, and not the funny kind. The odd thing is, there's no official fire brigade in Constantinople, not like you'd imagine. No uniforms, no shiny brass. It's just citizens, guilds, and whoever didn't run. And as a baker, you're weirdly central. Your oven means you're trained in flame, or so the city tells itself. Historians still debate whether this was a brilliant, decentralized civic system or a complete abdication of responsibility disguised as public spirit. Either way, here you are, knee-deep in ash water, passing buckets like you were born to it. "Move, move," someone yells. A pile of hides catches fire, releasing an awful stench, like burning shoes and sour wine. You gag. Mikhail slips and nearly drops the water skin. You hook a collapsing beam with your staff and tug. It falls with a sickening thud, barely missing a fishmonger who thanks you with a nod and an unrequested anchovy. "Keep the walls wet," Eustratius bellows over the den. "Drench the ones on the east side, they'll go next." The building to your left is already smoldering. A young woman leans out the window and tosses a basket of laundry at you, mostly undergarments, which land on your head. You peel a tunic off your face and shout, "Get down here!" She disappears inside, possibly to find more socks. Then you hear it, a crack, not sharp like thunder, but dull, low, spreading. The timbers are giving. The tannery is going to collapse. You pull Mikhail back just in time as part of the wall falls outward. Brick and splinters scatter like angry bees. Someone screams. You hear a donkey bray in protest, very offended by all of this. A monk behind you mutters a prayer in Greek and throws a bucket like a discus. The flames, meanwhile, are starting to recede, not from fear, but from exhaustion. The water is helping. So is the panic. You're soaked to the bone, your hands red and blistering, your lungs full of smoke and soot and, faintly, clove? Why does every Byzantine emergency smell like someone's trying to make mulled wine? And here's the thing, this happens all the time. Maybe not every week, but often enough. The city is a fire trap. Narrow alleys, overhanging balconies, clay tiles that blow away in a strong wind. People keep oil lamps near fabric, braziers on balconies, and don't even get started on what passes for chimney design. There's a theory, some say it's myth, that Emperor Constantine himself once declared that every baker must keep water nearby, not just for baking, but for public safety. Whether or not that law was real, it stuck. And so every bakery in the city, from the fanciest cake shop near the Senate to the one run by a guy who probably can't count to 12, has buckets, has blankets, has a fire pole. Even if you didn't ask for it, you're drafted into Constantinople's flame-fighting league. There's no quitting. There's just breakfast and blazes. Mikhail mutters something about his tunic catching fire and starts smacking it with a stale heel of bread. You're too tired to ask questions.
And now, as our story settles into its final embers, let's step gently back from the streets of Constantinople. The finers have faded for the night. The buckets are stacked. The oven glows with that familiar, friendly heat. More lullaby than threat now. The dough is proofing under cloth. The hooks are resting against the doorframe, no longer called to action. Even the goat, you'll be happy to hear, is quietly chewing on a reed basket in the corner. Peace has returned, for now. The city breathes, slowly. You can hear it if you listen. The creak of shutters swinging closed, the last murmurs of market stalls packing up for the evening, the soft chant of monks drifting over rooftops like a whispered benediction. You lie back in the bakery, soot smudged and soot settled, hands tired but calm. You did what needed doing. You kept the bread warm, the fire watched, the stories remembered. And as your eyelids grow heavy, just know that you're not alone. Across the city, in other corners and shops, others like you are keeping their vigil. Quiet, steady, flour on their sleeves, ash under their nails, watching the fire, not with fear, but with respect. Sleep now, baker. Let the city keep its secrets, and let the embers hum you to rest. You've earned it.